Welcome, and thank you for joining us for Service as a Software, seizing the $1.5 trillion service as a software opportunity. My name is Tony Filippone. I'm our Chief Research Officer here at HFS Research. And before we begin, here are a few housekeeping notes to keep this session running smoothly. While participant chat and audio has been turned off, we invite you to use the interactions in the Q&A function on the right-hand side. We'd like to make this interactive. So please submit your questions any point in time you'd like to, and feel free to upvote and comment on those as you like to. If you're having trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, try leaving and rejoining and checking your audio settings. And then finally, before we get started, we want to remind all participants that this session is being recorded and will be shared later. We will be sharing this via a link via email and LinkedIn in the coming days. So without further ado, Phil Fersht, our CEO and Chief Analyst, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Services as software, how do we seize this massive opportunity in the market? I think to start with, when we founded HFS back in 2010, we were trying very hard to create frameworks and models that would help us navigate the evolving services industry as it was then driven by a lot of technology. And the as a service economy was our first terminology back in 2014. We then shifted to, I think, one of our more famous inventions, which was the digital one office, which we launched in 2010, which was all about bringing front to back together, driven by data, driven by people, and bringing your employees close to your customers. In 2012, we worked with a company at the time called Blue Prism to introduce something called RPA, Robotic Process Automation, to the industry, which really started a lot of the thinking that is around today as we start to look at the emergence of Agentic and Gen AI technologies. The one ecosystem was where we expanded our one office to really bring in interconnected platforms, partners, and capabilities into the mix. And then generative business services was something we launched just after ChatGPT 3 went live, which was all about how enterprises could leverage generative and agentic tech to transform their businesses. And then back in last September, we decided to come up with this phrase called services as software, which would really articulate scalable IP-led solutions, how enterprises are going to starting to purchase services as if it's software. They're thinking more about, how do I get access to pre-configured work? How do I get access to outcomes? How do I pay in a more consumption-based model? How do I buy with purpose as opposed to just paying for time and materials and effort? So this led us to the mission that we have at HFS. Believe it or not, we do actually have one. And that is to be the most influential analyst advisory firm living at the intersection of services and software. So today, we're going to talk about why we should care. We should think about, what is the services as software value proposition, and how will it absorb revenue from both the services and software markets? How do you make SaaS, as we call it, real? So we think it's a $1.5 trillion opportunity. We're going to explain why we think it's going to be this big. And then we'll get into some real key takeaways for employees, enterprises, service providers, and software vendors. And we'll get a chance to take questions along the way. So type your questions into the panel, and we'll try and take them as we go along, and we'll definitely take a bunch at the end of the session. Speaking is myself today. I don't need to keep introducing myself, hopefully. I've been in the consulting and analyst industry for 3 decades, and there's never been a more fun time to be an analyst. I'm telling you right now, there's so much change and disruption happening. And for the first time ever, you almost have to forecast using different scenario planning, because anyone who thinks they can see 3 years out in this industry is talking science fiction. My colleague, Saurabh Gupta, will be sharing the spotlight, talking about services as software. He's our president for Research and Advisory Services, and Tony Filippone, who's our chief research officer, especially big focus around the enterprise and the recommendations on how to proceed with SaaS and where things are going.
I'm sick of living in the jungle. I need a better life. I'm gonna head to New York. I'm on my way to the HFS Fall Summit. Man, I'm so excited. I've arrived at the summit. The opening keynote starts soon. Hopefully I get to meet Phil. Phil is on now. He's talking about services as software. Me and Yeti never heard that one in the jungle, Theo. Not sure what it means. Holy cow! It turns out they want to replace us with AI. That's not good. I'll be back in the forest with Yeti if that happens.
Wait, but what if I use the AI to become some kind of super worker? Maybe I could take over the world and Yeti can work for me.
Big shout out to Phil and the whole HFS team. I used that Agentic thing and now I'm a billionaire. Yeti is doing my laundry as we speak. Ha! I'm sick of living in...
There we go. So that was our friend Yeti. Quick pitch, this October 8th and 9th in New York City, come join us for our flagship New York City Fall Summit, where we'll be really getting deep into the topics around services as software. We have keynote engagement from Fareed Zakaria, one of the Google DeepMind founders, Cassie Kozikov, Scott Galloway, the famous podcaster and TV personality, and we have other senior executives like May Habib, who's the CEO of Writer AI, and Brian Solis, who's the chief evangelist from Salesforce. So join us October. It'll be 2 days like you've never experienced, where we'll collaborate, share, debate, and have a bit of fun, free from PowerPoint, free from corny sales presentations, to really get to the core of where our industry is shifting. So why should you care? And I think that the legacy model is broken. IT services are stagnant. Clients are frustrated with both software and services. And another thing is AI can't be an excuse for layoffs in this world. I think we're all getting tired of the noise and the politics, and we want to get into what's really happening to our organizations. So we ran a major pulse study earlier this year to get to the heart of what factors are impacting organizations' abilities to achieve strategic priorities. And lo and behold, geopolitics dominates right now. Then it's economic factors, and then it's cybersecurity. We keep hearing about more and more cyber threats and issues and breaches, and we think there's at least 6 that we don't hear about for every one that we do. But the bottom line is, you know, this trade situation, political instability, wars going on around the world is dominating companies' decision making, and it can explain some of the choppy behavior we're seeing in companies' earnings and spending on tech, etc. But when we ran our summit last year, you know, we basically said, you know, like Gen AI, which all the talk was not really a big bang solution. It was an incremental innovation. It's a gradual disruption. But lo and behold, our wonderful president has poured a little bit of gasoline onto that smoldering platform, and now we got a burning one, right? And if we ever needed a burning platform to accelerate AI, this is it. And I think if we all heard the White House guidance and new push around AI yesterday, is they're taking the rails off and they really want to drive the AI economy more aggressively. And so we ran this further investment study about what are companies doing in response to the tariffs that are going on in the world. And only 1% said there's no significant change, whereas 54% are now making significant investments in emerging tech and AI to offset new pressures. So enterprises are starting to think, look, we've got to get our act together if we want to avoid some of this cross-border turmoil. We need to function effectively in an AI economy. There's no better time than now to start making these investments on our data sovereignty, on our cybersecurity, and our AI infrastructure, so we can truly start to take advantage of this. And just to share some of the dynamics we can expect to see. We ran a study with KPMG. We've just launched this live. If you hop to our website, you can download a copy of this. But we spoke with over 200 of the F1000 decision makers in the US to get a sense for what they were going to do in response to various levels of tariffs. So at 10%, most of them are really looking at automation and AI as the first lever that they're going to pull at a fairly modest tariff level, which is kind of what most are probably going to come in at. When tariff levels start to go up towards the 15% level, we start to see a lot more cost absorption and vendor renegotiation. This shows a strong bias towards preserving existing models until the pain really becomes too great. As we start to see tariffs maybe go towards the 20% level, that's when we start to see new delivery models being evaluated and not just a fringe innovation. And not until we get to very high tariff levels, well over 25%, will we start to see companies actually pull back on outsourcing and maybe even re-insure, onshore work completely. That's what we're seeing going on in the market. And this is very relevant, very current data on what companies are intending to do. So let's start to think about whether organizations are planning to replace human-led services with more AI-led solutions, which is really at the core of what we're looking at with AI. You can see here, only 25% don't really have plans. 59% of major decision makers across the global enterprises are intending to replace human-driven services with more AI-driven solutions over the next 3 years. And a few have already started driving these AI-led solutions already. So I think we got to get one thing straight here. It's not all about the tech anymore. The tech is here. The tech works. The tech's scalable. It's getting better at a breathtaking pace. I don't think any of us have seen more advancements in scalable technology than we've seen in the last 2 years, especially even the last 1 year. And only 16% see technology as the biggest constraint towards achieving their goals right now. The next is people having better skills, better change management, less misalignment of leadership. Then the problem is data, which is data quality. I think only a third of companies are truly happy with the quality of data they're enjoying right now. There's real issues around getting the right data to be effective. And the main issue is 35% cite poor process inefficiencies, lack of automation, poor governance gaps, and unclear strategic direction as the main problem holding them back as it comes to being really effective. So if we want to be successful and we want to be more effective with AI, stop obsessing around the tech and start focusing on everything around the technology to make it work. We've been through our own Agentic experience at HFS. It took us 10 months to rebuild 4,000 data assets and apply meta tags to all of them so they could be read by the Agentic software. And then we had to figure out some smarter processes and then actually get people to roll their sleeves up and run the stuff. It's not easy, but it really helps as an analyst company to drink your own champagne, really experience it yourselves. And a lot of things we went through, and I'm sure a lot of other people here are going through, is these are exercises that have been going on for 20, 30 years to transform and change your business. This isn't something that's completely new now. It's, hey, we got some cool new tech. It can really help mine information. It can really help prompting. It can really help our clients use our services. And by the way, if you have a little time, go to our website and check out Ask HFS on the website itself. Because this is really where things are shifting. And once you've experienced going through this, you're never looking back. I think one of our competitors famously came out and said something like 40% of agentic projects are going to be terminated. I'd say that's BS, right? You won't terminate a project. You'll just figure out how to do it better. Because once you bring in the technology, once you experience the impact it has on your business, particularly if you're in a knowledge business like ours, you're going to be very much behind where this is all going. Another issue that we need to combat with the industry, and this is a study we ran with Infosys early this year, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of nervousness around AI. So 45% of employees, they're either worried about job loss or they're very resistant to change. And this is a problem. You've got a smaller amount who are still in the sort of wait and see category, and only 15% are truly embracing Gen AI at the moment in terms of building out learning and innovation and support. We've got to be operating in a learning economy now. You know, if you can't turn around and say, I didn't learn anything in the last 6 months, I'm just doing the same old thing the same way, you're going to fail. We're in a world now where it's about embracing innovation, constantly learning new techniques, new ways of doing things, and finding the time to do it. We can't just keep gravitating around broken systems and processes like we keep seeing. And one of the other areas I think we have to really focus on is, invest in young talent. You may have seen there was a headline that came out recently about Big Four consulting firms were pulling back on graduate hiring, and a lot of them citing AI as the excuse. That's terrible, in my opinion. You're going to lose your identity. You know, there's 7% graduate unemployment in the US alone, which is well above the national average, which is under 5%, it's about 4%. The cadetship model is eroding because of a combination of AI and outsourcing. So a lot of the tasks that we used to hire kids to do fresh out of college, companies are now thinking we can just either outsource that and get it done cheaper, or we'll just automate it, or we'll just use AI. So how are we really going to build a company that's diamond shaped and just not have anything feeding in the bottom? Don't you want to bring in people who have fresh minds, they're not beset with years of legacy, and can actually help build a culture in your company, help build an identity for who you want to be? You want to be a good employer, that sort of thing. So I see AI is becoming a symptom of corporate greed, and we really need to address this. When we talk to enterprises, we need to talk about how we as people can be truly effective using AI versus let's just try and take out costs, take out jobs, take out processes as quickly as possible. So as I said, I think professional services firms could lose identity and edge in the market if they just focus on this obsessive behavior around taking out cost. And I get it. I see clients out there in the market going to providers saying, we want 20 to 30% cost savings because you use AI, right? So, and providers have little choice but to try and comply with that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, then do it smart. Invest in the talent. There's going to be some short-term pain to get to the long-term journey that we're all on. Because I truly believe when we look at this journey towards true software services as software, we're only 5 to 10% into that journey right now. And to get to that 50%, you've really got to invest in your talent, start to think about pivoting. So what's the solution? I'll tell you now, the principles of professional services are not changing. Right? We grew up in an industry that was built on skills at scale tied to common platforms. What's happening now is we still need lots of skills at scale, but it's tied to common AI platforms. So the technology is changing and the skills are changing, but the principles are exactly the same. If anything, it's getting even more centric around you need to have domain-centric skills. You need to be consultative. You need to be able to work with your clients in true partnerships now if you're going to sort of break to the other side of getting successful models in this place. So I think us as employers have a duty to create opportunities for young people. I really do. I think we need to start thinking about, what do we want to achieve as an organization? And do we want to create careers for people who are going to make us truly successful, who can bring in new ideas, new innovations and new frameworks? We've got to lean in, I think, to both our young talent and our AI tech together if we're truly going to be effective in this model. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my colleague Saurabh Gupta, who's going to get into the whole concept of what services as software is all about.
Fantastic. So Phil just outlined a very passionate why. Why should we care about this from talent to why things are broken right now. Let me talk about why we coined services and software and what it really means, because I think there is a brand new category that's emerging that will absorb revenue not just from services but also software. So let's dig into services as software. If we move to the next page, I think there is a fundamental issue that we are facing with the tech debt. Look, we estimated, and this is a conservative estimate, that if you look at the global 2000 enterprises, there is almost a $2 trillion tech debt that they're facing. And what have we done to solve that over the last 20, 30 years? We've created another $1.5 trillion IT services industry. And if you look at it, that 60% of that IT services industry essentially services that tech debt. It's not reducing it. So this tech debt keeps on increasing. We keep spending more to run the band-aids to sort of just keep extending the life of legacy. But at some point of time, this math doesn't add up, and that's a bubble that will burst. And that's why if we move to the next page, we are seeing stagnation in the growth of IT services. And right now, people are frustrated with service providers as well as software providers. You look at what SAP has done to our enterprises. SAP came to with, here's your accounts payable module, here's your finance module, here's your procurement module, here's your X, Y, and Z modules. And we created our organizations around SAP. Shouldn't it be the other way around, where SAP and the software adapts to our organizations? And the same goes with services. Services are so tied to labor. Whether it's strategy consulting, whether it's IT services, whether it's business services, we are still buying and selling services on rate cards and FTE basis. Where services firms are incented to drive more revenue by adding more people and more effort to it, we are simply paying for presence, not performance. And I think at some point of time, these bubbles will break. You can see on this chart, 2/3 of the enterprises are frustrated with both the services and the software model. So something has to give in. If we move to the next slide, Phil, what's also very interesting is we plotted what's going to be the anticipated growth rates across IT services, business services. And I won't go through each block because each block is its own story. But what's very interesting is that everything is red and yellow right now. There's hardly any green that you see on this chart. And that's why we've been stuck at low single digit growth rates in IT services for the last few years. And I don't anticipate, if we keep doing the same old, we don't anticipate things to be suddenly changing. There are only 2 or 3 hotspots here. One is surprise AI. AI and investments in AI are increasing. The second one is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a huge issue, and as we start to lean more into AI and emerging technologies, that's gonna increase our that means we have to increase our investment in cybersecurity. And the third is industry context. You see, if you look at the value chain for each industry, you'll start to see there is requirement, there is demand to optimize, improve several industry processes. But beyond that, if you start to look at the legacy IT and BPO, there's not much growth here, right? So clients are frustrated. There's not much growth. At the macro level, the math is not adding up because we're not reducing the tech debt. So what do we do here? And that's why last year, if we move to the next page, we coined this term services as software. This, I think, is a brand new category. Today, we only think of technology spend as either software or services. But I think over the next few years, we'll start to see a new category of services as software emerging, which will change 4 essential paradigms. It will change the delivery model. We are done with sort of just buying static software, where the software firms are telling us that my workflow is the best workflow and you client has to adapt to my workflow. We're also done with services which are just completely people driven, which is not incented to drive innovation and outcomes. And I think services as a software is AI driven, and hopefully it will start to become autonomous. Customization is another big problem. Software is limited. Current software is limited in the ability to customize. And what you have to do to customize is pay millions of dollars to your services firms, which are labor intensive to customize. But if we live in an AI-led world, then customization could be infinite. Pricing is another issue, right? How do software sells themselves right now? It's either feature-based. I have 10 features, so pay me more. Or if you want 5 more users, pay me more. How do services price themselves? Look, I'm telling you, we still price ourselves on presence, not performance. It's all about billable hours, FT basis. At some point of time, we need to a model which is consumption driven, which is outcome driven. And I think Tony in the next section will talk about how we think about pricing for services as software. And perhaps the most important paradigm here is adaptability. Business models are changing every day, whether you look at retail and CPG, whether you look at energy and utilities, whether you look at banking, financial services, healthcare, go at any industry. CEOs and boards want to change their business models. And our technology is not ready to be changed. It takes years, 3 years, 5-year transformation programs, because we are set in preset workflows, we are set with custom consulting. But with services as software, we can at least hope to be dynamic real-time changes where businesses move and technology and your IT moves with it. So I think these were the sort of 4 dimensions that we thought services as software should align. And if we start to see the future in this direction, I think the spending and the market forecasts change very dramatically. So let's move to the next page and talk about how we think the market is moving. But before I go there, look, I think this is our vision for services in the next. When we launched this last year, we thought this would be our 2030 vision. But as Phil mentioned, the tariffs and the economic uncertainty has really fast-tracked our vision. And we are now calling it a 2028 vision, not a 2030 vision. But if you look at most services today, believe it or not, there's still staff augmentation going on today. Most of these services, but are technology enabled. Whether you look at IT services, business services, or even consulting, they're technology enabled services. We see slivers of platform-led services also come in. Accenture Synops, TCS Cognix, Cognizant Riseto, and several other platform-based services exist. But most of these services today exist in those first 3 buckets. I think in the next 3 years, we'll start to see 2 big changes to this. One is AI-led agentic services, where instead of hiring a Saurabh, you can hire a super Saurabh, because super Saurabh is going to be more efficient and more effective and will know your context and will be ready from day one. But more broadly speaking, it will be services as software, which is a dramatic change in the business model itself. As I mentioned, those would be the 4 paradigms on how do we price these things, what's the adaptability for these, what's the level of customization, and what's the delivery model. All those 4 things will change. And I don't think this is sci-fi. This is happening right now. You should look at what some of the emerging startups like Rhino.ai, Writer, Daybreak, Now Platform, even some of what Salesforce is trying to do with Agentforce, etc. We've started to see where clients are, pushing out traditional BPO and IT service providers and starting to embrace some of these new ways of buying services. So this is already starting to happen. If we move on, I think let's look at what the market forecasts look like, right? If nothing happens, if assume there was no services as software and we continue the world as it is, you would expect the IT services, the global technology services, which is about $1.5 trillion today, to grow at that anemic rate of 5-6% and it'll still double in the next 10 years. If you look at software, it's about $1 trillion. It's growing at a much faster pace, about twice or thrice the services industry, about 10 to 15%, and it'll become 2.5, 3x of what it is in the next 10 years. But that's not the reality. That's not going to happen because we are seeing technology interventions and technology breakthroughs on a day in and day out basis. So what we expect to see is actually contraction of the legacy technology services. We think that if you continue to sell and buy services in the way that we sell it today, we'll start to see deflation. We'll start to see contraction in that market. What will happen is a brand new category will start to emerge, which is that what we call the services as software category, which we expect is almost nothing right now, but I think it's the fastest growing category right now, and we expect this to become $1.5 trillion, which will absorb a lot of revenue from your global technology services. But at the same time, it will also absorb revenue from the global software and the traditional way of software as a service or SaaS models as well. So I think there is this brand new orange triangle that's starting to come into our lives, which is this services as software category, which will absorb revenue not just from services, but also software. I think then the key question becomes who's going to win in this? Who's going to own that triangle? And I think if we move to the next page, our hypothesis is that there are 3 swim lanes that are going to emerge. I think one is software eating services, which is on the left-hand side, where software vendors will start to play in the services market. You're already starting to see it with SAP Joule, Salesforce, Agentforce. ServiceNow is trying to go after agentic services. In my 20, 30 years of being an analyst, a vendor, a client, I've never seen software come up with outcome-based pricing, right? We are starting to see that now. And why is that? Because they're seeing we can get a piece of that services revenue through services as software. I think the other category is the other way to approach this, that orange triangle that I was talking about, is services eating software. Which is on the right-hand side, where service providers start to codify their services as software. And we are seeing tons of examples of that already happening, right? Amdocs launching Amdocs Studios, FirstSource branding itself as the un-BPO company, even KPMG and the Big Four starting to launch things like KPMG Workplace, which are essentially agentic AI-driven consulting services. IBM launching IBM Consulting Advantage, Genpact launching Agentic as a service, Publicis launching something called a Slingshot, which is there to disrupt your application management services. So, and this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some examples, but services are essentially starting to be codified as a software. And the third swim lane is going to be your AI native and ecosystem driven startups and emerging players, and which is one of the most exciting spaces right now. You look at Rhino.ai, which is codifying what we did in SDLC, software development lifecycle, or you look at Writer.ai, which is trying to look at content management, marketing as a software. You look at Lizer, who we partnered in what Phil was describing as Ask HFS, trying to create different models, agentified models of professional services. So there are Catena X is another example on the automotive sector, which is trying to look at sort of data repositories within the manufacturing segment. So I think there is a blurring of lines between what used to be software and services. I think the competition has suddenly intensified. If you are a service provider, you should look at software as your competition. You shouldn't just look at your immediate service provider peers as the threats, but the threat and the opportunities are expanding as we speak. The question is, do we see it as a glass half full or a glass half empty? Because I think For us at HFS, it's a glass half full conversation, because I think it's a $1.5 trillion new opportunity, which is fast growing, and sort of aligns with what enterprises want. But if you continue to do the same things over and over again, I think it's a glass half empty conversation where you're going to face deflation, or you're going to see very low single-digit growth. So with that, let me turn it over to Tony, who will guide us on what's the playbook to get to this $1.5 trillion opportunity that Phil and I have been talking about. Tony, over to you.
So it's very clear probably by now that this isn't just another buzzword, right? Services as software is real. There isn't an enterprise that I've spoken to that hasn't had a major board level conversation on this particular topic around the implications of AI to their business models. Every organization we speak to, they're tired of a slow, bespoke delivery model, combining outsourced services, professional services, a variety of contract services, those types of things. If you really believe that the future of services is no services and it'll be deployed as software, you're wondering how to get there. So let's unpack that here in the time that we have for today. If we move to the next slide then. So we ran a study with Infosys, and we looked at enterprises and how they're leveraging AI out there. And there's about 55% of organizations with all that pressure that are rushing out there to explore the future of how AI is going to be used in the area. And go ahead, Phil, feel free to build the rest of the slide out. And then from a fast followers perspective, there's a variety of organizations that are trying to build out the applications and their functions to look at broader functional capabilities, looking at real-time data. They're really trying to understand how they can more purposefully deploy AI. Then you've got the front runners, this 12% area, and they're embedding it into their key operational decisions. And so what I'm trying to bring to everyone's attention here is that 12% success stat. That's a strategy gap with the other 88% of the organizations that are just still looking at more exploring and tinkering. They're stuck in these isolated pilots. They're trying to look at shiny tools and technology. You need to look at your operating models. You need to make AI not just part of your technology strategy, not just part of your operations strategy, but what does it mean to the business? AI is not a bolt-on feature. It is going to be the future of how your organization operationally succeeds, whether you're in finance, whether you're in supply chain, whether you're in some type of banking function. All those areas are going to need this space here. So services as software is not just about delivery. It's about how you're going to use technology to scale your business. If we go to the next slide, then what we see out there from a productivity perspective is that we ran a study here. Oh, we're not running a study here. We're collecting business cases. I think the number now is over 1,000 right now. And we're collecting tons of these business cases. And what you see at the pilots and proofs of concept perspective, that over half of these, or half of organizations, are deploying tools and technologies to focus on productivity. And you look at the right-hand side of what has actually made it into production, it's actually stuck. When you think about what actually sticks out there, it just proves that performance, personalization, prediction, that's what sticks, because that's what's meaningful to your business. This is not just about productivity any longer. Sure, absolutely, you're going to find the productivity savings, like you found productivity savings for the last 30 years in technology implementations. But what's different here and what's really sticking here is about how organizations are going to make better decisions, how are they going to engage their customers and their employees, how are they going to drive competitive advantage. And so the best organizations are going to look beyond just productivity. You're going to look into these other areas to actually advance the purpose of their business in their areas and their markets. Moving on to the next slide here. One of the challenges we're seeing out there is pricing. So I'm a 10-year chief procurement officer. Almost everyone who's on today's webinar has absolutely discussed and seen this particular issue. You're all familiar with FTE-based pricing. It's super simple. It's very easy to deal with. But then when you start getting this agentic pricing, something is happening in the minds of buyers and sellers in the market. Every single buyer is looking at this complex organizations of humans in the loop. They're trying to count tokens and estimate token usage. How much does a model cost? How much does it cost to train? Do I have to retrain it? How often? And what does that cost each and every single time? And what type of talent do I need to run all of this? There's a ton of storage here as I start making all this data available. And wow, our compute costs are really going to increase. So what buyers are doing, they're overestimating usage. They don't want to come short on their budgets. They're buying insurance because they don't want any surprises in their invoices. They're looking at these complicated bills. When you add up everything you see in the agentic pricing box, you're going to need a PhD in billing to be able to solve this if we're not careful. And no enterprise leader and no service provider, market leader really wants to deal with risk. They want emotional comfort. And what needs to happen here in the future is you look at your pricing models for the future. You're going to need to figure out how you can simplify this, but also to get comfortable with the complexity of what this new model is going to be. It's not an all or nothing place, but you're not going to be able to rely on FTE-based pricing any longer. However, the agentic pricing has to look different. And we did some research on this. Phil, if you can move to the next slide then. When you look at this work that we did with Publicis Sapient this year, and you look at how actually enterprises, this is 608 IT and business leaders, and they're looking at what's going to drive their adoption of services as software. You're looking at simple pricing, subscription-based pricing with fixed monthly basis, 56%, outcome-based pricing, which we really don't believe is truly outcome in terms of sharing savings and sharing productivity cost benefits, but it's actually creating the outputs that we really want to see, some type of consumption, paying for what you use and have. And at the very bottom of this, you'll see transaction-based usage, right? What you're seeing on this behind the scenes here is that since complexity kills confidence and buyers want predictability, they're really pushing themselves to figure out how they can actually price this set of services as subscription-based and outcome-based pricing, which takes a lot more when it comes to contracting and developing your contracting, all the price points and the service levels and what goes in and goes out and for who owns what models and all. And that's what you're seeing here from a pricing services as software perspective. In order to achieve what you need out there, you need to be able to get to prices that everyone can understand. And every enterprise is trying to negotiate right now to get to something that's not going to put their jobs at risk, but it's going to accelerate and advance the business. And as the complexity of what's being priced right now simplifies, we believe there'll be even greater adoption of services as software in the market. So let's wrap this up before I close it out with Phil in terms of where you need to invest in 3 particular areas going forward. So first off, people management. It's clear in terms of what your organization needs to deploy. This isn't about old BPO and ITO models and consulting. You're going to need to invest in the skills, the training, the capabilities of your team to adopt this technology. You're going to need to find partners that are going to do the work that you need them to do, but they're going to create impact, not with tons of people, but with advice and insight. This is about combining AI with humans to create new outcomes. From a product management perspective, when you look at the products that are coming to market and how you're going to design and build your products in the market, and you're going to support them in your IT organizations and your business leading organizations. From that perspective, building standardized, efficient frameworks, being able to leverage products that are going to be they're going to codify your expertise. They're going to deliver outcomes, not just code and headcount. You're going to need to develop products that do services as a software. And that's a little different. Imagine for a moment looking at your SAP financial stack and thinking about how do I actually get this software to actually produce operational outputs such that it can replace 30 to 50% of my CFO organization. If you're in a call center organization, you're thinking about Salesforce and how you're going to use that in your CRM type spaces. How do I use Agentforce to replace significant amounts of my workforce? And this is about looking at how you're going to use your products and your different capabilities to best eliminate the roles of people and replace them with software. And finally, from a partner management perspective, there's probably been no time like now in the last 20, 30 years that you have relied more on partners. This is going to take a family, an ecosystem to actually build. Collaboration is going to drive your innovation. And when you start looking at your service providers and your technology providers and your advisors and the analysts that you're using, you're going to need a combination that is going to be focused on where your future is, knows your vertical, knows your business processes, but then can plug and play, that you're going to have speed and capabilities and accelerators to quickly get you the results that you need. Think about how you're going to govern all of this and how you're going to be able to trust it with all the rising regulation in Europe. So if your partners can give you speed, scale, and innovation, you're going to get an ecosystem, and that's what you're looking for. So Phil, I'll hand it off to you. That way you can close it out.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. I've got a couple of questions I thought we could hop to. One, I've got a couple around GCCs and how do we see them playing into this as we start to see the landscape emerge. Maybe Saurabh, would you like to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think, look, especially if you look at India, there's a tale of two cities going on. On one hand, you see sort of flattening to declining growth in the third-party business, and there you see explosive growth happening in GCCs. So I think, look, in times of uncertainty, people look inwards, and GCCs have become a lot more easier to set up. There's a lot of middle management talent that's available today. It's not just about India. It's just not about entry level talent. And so setting up GCCs is fairly straightforward. And when you don't know what the outcome is going to look like, when you don't know what you're gunning for, I think you turn inwards than third parties. Because to the question that Tony was asking, how do you price these services as software? How do you sort of look at intellectual property? How do you look at legal liabilities, etc.? Is hard. We need a new playbook for buying and selling this new stuff. But at the same time, so I think that's the short-term view, is why GCCs are growing very rapidly. But if you look at the long-term view, I think GCCs and third parties are two sides of the same coin. You know, if third parties are going to get impacted by AI, GCCs are going to get impacted by AI. There's just going to be a lag effect. And I think the same questions that we are posing here apply to the GCC model as well. I think our view is that in the long run, both models will survive, because I think enterprises need both third parties and they need their in-house capability centers to really drive to the strategic outcomes that they're looking for. So I think this whole debate of GCC versus third parties is probably that we should sort of get out of. And I think we should figure out how do both these things work together. You know, it should be third party and GCC conversation versus a third party versus GCC conversation.
Thanks. I've got a question, and I don't mind taking a stab at this one, around where do Capgemini and Accenture play into this, because they're talking a big game. I think that they've definitely been very aggressive with repositioning for this space. I think I'll start with Accenture, because they were the first to coin digital, and they were the ones to move into cloud first and build the company through lots of acquisitions. And now they're 800,000 strong. And what they've done is, I think they've united all their different services products around under one leader, Manish Sharma. And I think that for them, this is, they're seeing this as one of the biggest challenge any of these service providers are ever going to face. And how do you go from a very people-heavy organization to start to be able to deliver to clients with a much more portfolio approach that they can combine consulting, non-tech and tech resources together to service their clients. You saw the earlier slide that showed, processes are the areas which require, I think, the most attention to be AI successful. That takes me a little bit to the Capgemini acquisition of WNS, which I think it's very exciting in terms of it gives them a stronger foothold in the traditional business, but it also gives them a lot more process capability at scale with domain-specific capabilities in verticals like travel and insurance and things like that. But I think, as I said, we're 5 to 10% into a long journey. These are two of the market leaders, I think, who've been aggressive. And I would also say, the big Indian heritage companies on the whole, I think, they're making big noise about training 250,000 emerging talent folks in AI. I think the industry should be commended for making a big deal out of this and recognizing that things are going to change, but the real hard miles start now. And those who can make the investments internally, those who can maybe incubate some services, those who can maybe take some margin hit to reinvest in the new model will come out the other side. I think I'll just add the one point, those who are really investing in their talent, especially young talent who get this stuff, are ultimately the ones who create an identity and can be successful in this space. Got another question around fear of AI. Is that 40% onshore or offshore? Tony, would you like to talk a bit about, you've come from a major enterprise before you rejoined us, and can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the enterprises in terms of fear and an approach to AI?
So I often think there's a difference between fear and anxiety. And I don't think it's fear. I think there's a lot of anxiety in the marketplace right now in terms of what AI means to operations, but also to the business. What the boardrooms are asking their organizations to look at is not just simple productivity improvements, which should create fear potentially, but they're asking organizations to transform themselves. I'll give you an example. For 25 years, 30, 45, 50 years, we've been processing invoices the same way, using the same ERPs or different tools in your STP stacks, right? But why can't you just stick an agent in the middle of it and do all of it for yourself? It'll handle all of your supplier onboarding, all the differences of POs and matching and, getting your banking information. And that type of transformation, if I was a senior leader, that's anxiety creating because they're dealing with a foot in their back to push them forward. At the same time, they're trying to figure out solutions while every single service and tech provider is trying to hawk their goods and services at them. And they're trying to make good decisions for themselves. So I don't think it's fear, it's anxiety out there. And from an FTE perspective or an employee perspective, if you're actually using the services, this is an excellent opportunity for you to reinvest in your skills. And every leader out there that I've spoken to is talking about how to train the workforce. I got off a phone call today with a leader in a bank, and they are essentially requiring every one of their employees to get trained in an AI. And they're using and deploying their own GPT version of AI at their bank. That way they can use it internally. Like, it's not about fear out there. It's about anxiety and how do I use this? And what a terrific time to be working out there, because you get to have these great tools and you'll have AI plus you. I think it's a great place to be. Reframe it.
Thanks, Tony. So, Saurabh, as services companies shift left and product companies shift right, do services companies need to adopt more of a product mindset? And if so, how do services companies make that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. This slide is a perfect example that we are on, is a perfect example of that. I think services companies have been obsessed with people management, and I think that's their core strength. And I'm not saying that should go away. I think they should continue to be people obsessed. But at the same time, I think where we've lacked investments at services companies is product management. Simple things like version control, product marketing, one-to-many solutions. You look at all software companies, they invest a ton of money into managing their products. Services companies, it's not like they don't have great product ideas, but those product ideas die their own death when that person who came up with the with the idea goes away. And I think if we don't productize our solutions and invest in a product mindset, I think it's going to be a hard battle. We have to develop a product muscle, and at the same time, you have to invest in the ecosystem or the partner management muscle as well. So I think it's going to be those three P's: people management, where people is not just sort of humans, but human plus machine operating model. It's sort of investment in product management, and it's investment in partner management. I think that's what we see as the muscles required to sort of get to this services as software ambition.
Hey, Saurabh, if I could just interject, I think the flip side of this, on the software side of this, the muscle they need to develop is the services and operations capability, something they don't know how to do. And so we all focus on the services industry, but the software company needs to know, how do you run a call center? How do you run an AP team? How do you run a claims processing team and track it and manage it? Because it's a bunch of agents that'll be doing it in the future. And there's the same 4 Ps there that they need to master, the services do.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Someone's asked if Palantir is a SaaS native company. Absolutely not. They have a lot of on-premise because they do a lot of sensitive government work and things like that. But great stock price. There you go. So I think, in the interest of time, we're coming to the end of this conversation. I think to conclude, the legacy services industry is definitely running on borrowed time, and it's moving fast. And I think if you can't get your head around the changes that are happening in the industry, the speed of deal flipping and stuff, I think you're in trouble. You've got to get ahead of this. It's a big wake up call. We're calling it a $1.5 trillion wake up call. We got to pay our debts off to scale AI, as we were talking about. It's broken workflows and processes and data silos. Don't fall for the AI productivity trap. Build a balanced scorecard for your AI initiatives, across performance, personalization, productivity, prediction, these types of things. And, if you're still buying and selling bodies, you're already behind. That's the big, I think, takeaway we're seeing in spades in the industry. As we said earlier, invest in young talent or lose the future. Your identity is at stake here. I really worry for companies who become too automated. You'll end up standardizing on 4 or 5 pieces of software. And what's the personality and the identity of the company? Why will clients want to spend money with you? And then finally, get your hands dirty. AI is not going to replace you, but someone who knows how to use it better will probably replace you. The day of paying lip service to this is very much over. And I think if you spend time talking to experts in this industry now, you've got nowhere to hide anymore. It's a world where we need to find time to keep learning and be able to tell people what you've learned. It's very, very important. So we'll have a copy of these slides available. I think if you go to our website, we'll make sure they're easy to find, and we'll also try and email you guys a copy of the deck, because I know we had over 1,000 people sign up for this, so we'd like to share a copy with everybody. But I will bid you farewell, and on behalf of my colleagues Saurabh and Tony, thank you very much for your time, and to the next one.